Today, I'm watching every John Wayne World War II movie to find the absolute best. And trust me, there are surprises. From on-set fistfights to John Wayne playing a German soldier, let's see which one takes the #1 spot. John Wayne plays a German captain in The Sea Chase, a rare thing for him and something that got him a ton of backlash back in the day. He didn't even bother with an accent, but he always said he took the role because Ehrlich was a good German, not a Nazi. The story kicks off right after the invasion of Poland. Wayne's character, demoted for refusing to support the Nazi regime, gets stuck commanding an old steam freighter, and things only get messier from there. Elsa Keller, played by Lana Turner, is on board as cargo, officially the fiancée of a British officer, but in reality she's a German spy. The Australian Navy closes in, and what follows is a mix of adventure, intrigue, and a romance that never really clicks. Behind the scenes, it was just as rocky. Wayne and Turner fought constantly. She later called him rude, crude, and totally unprofessional. Even director John Farrow couldn't handle it. He and Turner clashed so badly that he shot some of her scenes with stand-ins after she refused to come back to set. The storm sequences weren't just Hollywood magic either. They shot them in freezing California waters, and a few crew members got hurt when real waves slammed into their fake ship. Despite all that chaos, the film still delivers classic high seas suspense. IMDb gives it a 6.5. I think it's pretty solid for a mid-50s adventure flick. The Fighting Seabees drops John Wayne right into the Pacific Theater, not as a soldier but as Wedge Donovan, a tough construction boss who wants to arm his men so they can defend themselves. The higher-ups finally agree, turning his guys into the Navy's construction battalions, the real-life Seabees. The movie is part war action, part straight-up propaganda, with plenty of big battles, but at its core, it's about the birth of a new kind of fighting unit. The U.S. Navy got so involved they handed over real ships, equipment, even combat footage. That cooperation paid off. After the film hit, Navy enlistment spiked. John Wayne said the script was corny, but it's hard to argue with results. Susan Hayward's scenes with Wayne were rough, though. They argued constantly to the point that director Edward Ludwig sometimes had to shoot their scenes separately because they couldn't agree on who was stealing focus. IMDb gives it a 6.6, and it holds up as one of Wayne's most blatantly patriotic roles. Operation Pacific takes Wayne underwater, this time as Duke Gifford. The USS Thunderfish returns from a rescue mission just in time to face off with a Japanese carrier, but everything goes wrong. Faulty torpedoes leave them stranded in enemy waters, and the crew has to survive with nothing but nerves and luck. Director George Wagner shot most of the movie on board a real Navy submarine, with actual sailors appearing as extras. The plot is classic Golden Age war formula, but the cast and tension make it feel bigger. There's even a mystery angle lifted from real war submarine missions, and the Navy made sure everything looked and felt right. Patricia Neal plays the love interest, and off-screen, she and Wayne had a brief, strange romance right after Wayne's second marriage ended. Friends said his sad vibe in the movie wasn't acting. IMDb lands this one at 6.7, which tracks for a solid wartime thriller. Back to Bataan puts Wayne in the thick of the Pacific War, this time as Colonel Joseph Madden, leading the resistance after the Japanese invade the Philippines. Anthony Quinn plays Andres, whose family's hero status is key to rallying local support, but the plot's more complicated than just good guys versus bad guys. The movie was a straight-up tribute to the Filipino resistance, but it changed constantly. Rewrites happened as the real war shifted, sometimes daily. They even mixed in actual newsreel footage of real executions and atrocities, some of it so raw that censors demanded edits. Wayne never served in the war, and he took a lot of criticism from veterans for it, so he pushed hard to make his character look as tough as possible. Director Edward Dmytryk admitted later that the studio faked some of the enemy footage, splicing together leftover shots from other movies with real Bataan combat clips. Filipino-American extras didn't get star treatment. They worked for cigarettes and rations during the jungle scenes. The whole thing is a blend of fact and fiction, but it's effective. The Wings of Eagles tells the true story of Frank Weed, a naval aviator who gets paralyzed in an accident right after World War I. Wayne plays Weed as he transitions from fighter squadron commander to screenwriter, helping the war effort from his typewriter when he can't fly. The real Weed and John Ford, the director, were friends, and Ford took on the film almost as an apology for how badly he'd treated Frank in the past. Ford even directed Wayne in one of Frank's scripts back in 1945. Shooting this movie was rough. Wayne almost quit because Ford was constantly mocking him on set, calling him Duke the Cripple. It got so bad Ford slapped Wayne in the face and screamed at him to act, damn it, act. Wayne later called it one of the hardest shoots of his career. And in a weird twist, Ford turned some of the film's darkest moments into upbeat musical montages, throwing in happy music over tragic scenes, which left audiences completely confused. Still, the movie honors a guy who made a difference even when grounded. IMDb puts it at 6.7. Back in 1942, Hollywood put out Flying Tigers, a movie built around the legend of volunteer American pilots fighting in China before the U.S. entered World War II. John Wayne plays Captain Jim Gordon, the squadron leader holding his ragtag team together against the Japanese invasion. There's a hotshot pilot who joins up, makes things harder for Gordon, but that's just window dressing for a story that was almost completely made up. The real Flying Tigers were still fighting overseas when Republic Pictures started shooting, and the studio had almost zero information about what was actually going on, so the plot was mostly written as they went. You get plenty of action, but most of it's done on the cheap. Aerial battles use stock footage and toy planes on wires. John Carroll, Wayne's co-star, even did his own flying stunts until he crashed a real plane, barely survived. That's how rough it was behind the scenes. Even so, the film did its job as wartime propaganda, but it stood out for not stooping to the racist caricatures that were everywhere in those days. Republic had to add disclaimers, since the real Flying Tigers weren't part of the official Army Air Corps, but the squadron loved the attention anyway. John Wayne got a thank you letter from them, even though one pilot joked, "Our planes never looked that shiny." By 1949, John Wayne was playing Sergeant Stryker in Sands of Iwo Jima, a role that turned him into the face of tough Marine leadership. Stryker is strict to the point of cruelty, but once his men are in combat, they see how high the stakes really are and why his methods matter. The film was a hit, earning 3 Oscar nominations, including Best Actor for Wayne, Best Writing, and Best Editing. The character of Stryker takes inspiration from real-life Marine hero John Basilone, who died at Iwo Jima, but Wayne himself had never served. That detail wasn't lost on veterans, who sometimes resented seeing him play the war hero on screen. The Marine Corps helped out with the production, loaned actual combat footage from Iwo Jima for the finale, and brought in real veterans as extras. Some even broke down during the flag-raising scene, which featured 3 of the actual men from the iconic photograph: Ira Hayes, Rene Gagnon, and John Bradley. For a Hollywood war movie, that's as close as it gets to the real thing. John Ford directed They Were Expendable, telling the story of the PT boats and their crews trying to hold the line after Pearl Harbor. It's a rough, unromantic look at the early days of the war, where the enemy's got more firepower and the odds are stacked. Wayne and Robert Montgomery star as the officers in charge. Montgomery actually served as a PT boat commander during the war, so he was playing himself in a lot of ways. John Ford wasn't just directing. He'd actually filmed real combat for the Navy, and he used some of that footage here. Ford clashed with Wayne constantly, calling him a draft dodger to his face since Wayne had never served. That tension pushed Wayne into one of his best, most restrained performances. They Were Expendable didn't try to turn the story into a victory parade. Ford's own bitterness about the war comes through, and the film's realism makes it stand out. In Harm's Way put John Wayne in command of a cruiser during Pearl Harbor. He starts out on the front lines, then gets sidelined after running out of fuel and losing the chance for payback. Wayne's character, Captain Rock Torrey, spends the rest of the film working for redemption. Eventually he gets his shot, promoted to Rear Admiral and sent to take the fight back to Japan. What makes this one different is the focus on the people. Otto Preminger directs with an eye for drama, maybe too much sometimes. He was famous for bullying actors, and even Wayne almost walked off set after a blow-up with him. Kirk Douglas was miserable too, but he took the part to challenge himself after Spartacus. All the big naval scenes use real ships and aircraft since the U.S. Navy came on board with full support, one of the last times Hollywood had that kind of access. The mix of character drama and big war action split critics, but the movie drew crowds thanks to the cast and the sheer scale of the production. The Longest Day pulls off something no other World War II movie really manages. Shot in a docudrama style, it covers D-Day from every possible angle, Allied and German. The production is massive. 5 directors, a cast packed with stars like John Wayne, Henry Fonda, Richard Burton, Sean Connery, Robert Mitchum, and more. Some are there for the art, some for the paycheck. Wayne demanded $250,000 for just 3 days' work, which was a fortune at the time. What sets it apart is the authenticity. Real D-Day veterans were consultants. Richard Todd, who plays a British officer, actually jumped into Normandy on D-Day. Zanuck shot the movie in black and white to blend in real war footage, even paying for some of it himself when the studio balked at the costs. French and German actors spoke their own languages. No dubbing, one of the first big war movies to do that. The Longest Day doesn't just retell history, it recreates it with epic detail. That attention to accuracy, combined with Hollywood's full muscle, makes it the gold standard for World War II on film.